The waves crashed on the clean beach at Hampton Beach as Nathaniel Brooks stepped out of his big house. He was 52 years old and had everything he could ever want: a successful business, houses in many countries, and a young wife, Veronica, who was half his age. His gray and white hair blew in the morning wind as he adjusted his expensive sunglasses, ready for another relaxing day. "Darling, the masseuse will be here at 11, called out Veronica from the deck. She was 28, blonde, and exactly the type of woman that people expected Nathaniel to marry. Nathaniel waved, not really paying attention. He was already thinking about his walk on the beach. The last 15 years had been good for Nathaniel. After his divorce from Claire, his first wife, he worked hard and grew his business into a huge empire. He had made himself look like one of New York's most eligible bachelors. Finally, he married Veronica. His life seemed perfect, or so he thought. Nathaniel walked along the beach, waving at some of the other rich people who lived there. He was about to turn back when something made him stop. He saw two people building a sandcastle. One of them was Claire, his ex-wife, the woman he hadn't seen in 15 years. But it wasn't Claire that made him freeze. It was the young girl beside her. The girl looked about 14 or 15, and she had the same features as Nathaniel's family: his mother's cheekbones, his sister's curly hair, and most strikingly, his deep brown eyes. She smiled at something Claire said, and Nathaniel felt like the world was turning upside down. The girl's smile looked just like his. Nathaniel stood still, his feet sinking into the sand. Claire hadn't seen him yet, but when he stared at her, she looked up, and their eyes met. At first, there was a look of surprise in Claire's eyes, followed by fear. Claire quickly stood up and brushed the sand off her dress. She looked different from the last time Nathaniel saw her. Her skin glowed in the sun, and her hair was styled in braids, not the way it used to be when she worked in an office. She had aged well, but Nathaniel hardly noticed because his eyes were still fixed on the girl. "Mom, what's wrong?" the girl asked, looking at Claire. The word mom hit Nathaniel like a punch in the stomach. His mind raced back 15 years to their last fight. He remembered how angry he had been when he found out Claire wanted to start her own business, something he saw as a betrayal of their dream to build their company together. "Ava, honey, pack up your things," Claire said, trying to stay calm. But Nathaniel could hear the tension in her voice, the same tension he used to hear when things were falling apart between them. Ava, that was the girl's name. She was the right age to be Nathaniel's daughter. "Ava, not now," Claire said, looking at him. "Do you know him, Mom?" Ava asked, her eyes going between Nathaniel and Claire. Before Claire could answer, Nathaniel heard Veronica's voice from the house. "Nathaniel, darling, the masseuse is here early." Nathaniel turned toward the sound, and when he looked back, Claire and Ava were already leaving. They grabbed their things quickly and walked away. Nathaniel stood there feeling confused and full of questions. Back at his house, Veronica was waiting with the masseuse, but Nathaniel didn't really listen to her complaining. He locked himself in his office, his hands shaking. He picked up his phone. "Sam," he shouted at his private investigator. "Find everything you can about Claire Bennett's daughter. Her name is Ava, and she's about 14 or 15. When he hung up, Nathaniel sat in his big chair, still in shock. The girl's face kept popping into his mind. She had his smile. He couldn't believe he didn't know about her. He remembered the last time Claire had tried to talk to him, but he had been too angry to listen. "Nathaniel, the board meeting call is in 10 minutes. Are you ready?" Veronica knocked on his door. Nathaniel straightened up. He had built his life around being in control and having power, but now, with his world starting to crack, Nathaniel felt more out of control than ever. He walked to the conference room, but his mind wasn't on the meeting. He was already thinking about how he could find out more about the girl, his daughter. He knew he needed to fix things with Claire. Outside, the sun was still shining on Hampton Beach. not caring about the lives it had just changed. In her car, Claire was gripping the steering wheel tightly. She glanced at Ava in the rearview mirror. Her daughter was texting her friends, unaware that everything in her life was about to change. Ava looked up from her phone and said, "Mom, that man on the beach looked at me funny. Do you know him?" Claire took a deep breath. She had kept a lot of secrets for a long time, and now it felt hard to keep them anymore. "Yes, honey, I used to know him a long time ago." Ava smiled and went back to looking at her phone, but Claire could feel the tears in her eyes. She had always thought this day might come, but now that it was happening, she wasn't ready. As she drove away from the Hamptons, she couldn't stop thinking about how surprised Nathaniel had looked when he saw Ava, how he had recognized her. Her phone rang, showing a number she hadn't seen in 15 years, but she still knew it, Nathaniel's number. Claire let it go to voicemail, but she knew this was just the beginning. Her life, the one she had worked hard to build with Ava, was about to change, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Back in New York City, Claire walked around her office trying to focus on her work. Her marketing business had become really successful, but today, she couldn't think about all the papers on her desk. Her phone showed 17 missed calls from Nathaniel. "Miss Bennett, your daughter's school is online," her assistant said through the intercom. Claire grabbed the phone. "Hello, is everything okay with Ava?" "Mrs. Bennett, this is Principal Bennett. Ava had an incident today in the cafeteria. A man tried to talk to her, and security had to escort him out. We need you to come right away." Claire's heart stopped. What did he look like? He's tall, has gray hair, and wore an expensive suit. He said he was her father. Claire knew exactly who it was. "Of course, Nathaniel," she muttered to herself. She grabbed her purse, feeling nervous. "I'll be there in 15 minutes. At Westbrook Academy, Claire found Ava sitting in the principal's office, looking confused and upset. Two security guards stood nearby, and Principal Bennett looked worried. "Mom, why did that man from the beach say he's my father?" Ava asked as soon as she saw Claire. "He tried to give me a letter, but security took it." Claire sat down next to Ava. This was the moment she had feared for 15 years, and it was even worse than she had imagined. Principal Bennett said, "Mrs. Bennett, we need to update our records about who can contact Ava." Before Claire could answer, a voice came from the door. "That won't be necessary." It was Nathaniel, standing with his lawyer. "I've already filed for an emergency hearing about parental rights." Claire felt so angry. "You had no right to come to her school." Nathaniel didn't back down. "I had every right. She's my daughter." Ava looked between them, confused. "Mom, what's going on?" Before Claire could speak, Veronica stormed into the office, looking angry. "Nathaniel, what is this? Your secretary said you canceled all your meetings to come to some school." Veronica looked at Ava, then Claire, and then back at Nathaniel. Her face went from angry to understanding. "So, this is why you've been acting so weird since the beach?" she asked. "Another secret from your past coming back to haunt us." Nathaniel sighed. "Veronica, not now." Ava looked at Claire. "Mom, is he really my father?" Claire looked at her daughter and thought about how many times Ava had asked about her father. She thought about all the things she had done to give Ava a good life without Nathaniel's help. She thought about the nights she spent crying, remembering the divorce papers Nathaniel had signed, saying he wanted to end everything with no connections. "Yes," Claire finally said. "Nathaniel Brooks is your father." Veronica laughed in a bitter way. "Well, this is perfect. First, I find out you're planning a secret business deal behind the board's back, and now I find out you have a secret black daughter. Wait until the press hears about this." Nathaniel got angry. "If you say one word to the press, those prenup terms you love so much will look very different." Principal Bennett cleared his throat. "Maybe we should continue this conversation somewhere more private." Ava stood up. "No. I want to hear everything. I deserve to know the truth." Claire reached for Ava's hand, but Ava pulled it away. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "Because he didn't want us to be a family," Claire said softly. "He made that very clear." Nathaniel shook his head. "That's not true. I tried to tell you. I tried to tell you I was going to be a dad, but you didn't let me." Claire's heart broke as she remembered that day. She remembered trying to tell Nathaniel she was pregnant, but he didn't want to hear it. Instead, he had his security guard kick her out. Veronica's phone beeped and she looked at it, giving a cold smile. "This has been interesting, but I have a lunch date with David Miller from your board of directors, Nathaniel. I'm sure he'll find this situation very interesting," she said. Nathaniel grabbed Veronica's arm. "Don't try to use this to control me," he warned. "Let go of her." Ava suddenly shouted. Everyone turned to look at her. She was shaking. "Just stop it, all of you. I don't want to be part of this." She ran out of the office. Claire started to follow, but Nathaniel stopped her. "Let me talk to her. Please, Claire, I've missed 15 years. Give me a chance to make it right." Claire looked into Nathaniel's eyes and saw something she hadn't seen in a long time. Real emotion, not coldness like before. But before she could say anything, Sam, the lawyer, stepped forward. "I've filed the papers for a DNA test and an emergency custody hearing," he said. "We'll let the courts decide." Claire laughed bitterly. "You still haven't changed, have you, Nathaniel? You think money and lawyers can fix everything." "What else could I do?" Nathaniel replied. "You kept my daughter from me for 15 years. "I didn't keep her from you," Claire answered. "You pushed us away because you were angry about me wanting a job." Veronica watched all this with growing anger. "I can't believe this. I thought I married a powerful man, not someone who lets his ex-wife and teenage daughter ruin everything we've built." She stormed out, her high heels clicking on the floor. Nathaniel didn't even look at her. Principal Bennett spoke up. "Mr. Brooks, Mrs. Bennett, I need you to take this conversation elsewhere. Ava's well-being is the most important thing right now." Claire gathered her things, her mind racing. She had to find Ava and explain everything. But how could she explain it when she didn't even fully understand it herself? How could she tell her daughter about the love she once had for Nathaniel? How could she explain the bitterness that had ruined everything? How could she explain why she decided to raise Ava alone instead of fighting for Nathaniel? As she walked out, Nathaniel called after her. "Claire, wait, we need to talk." Claire stopped and turned to face him. 15 years ago, you didn't want to talk. You wanted to win. What's changed?" "I have," Nathaniel said softly. "Seeing you again, seeing Ava, I can't just walk away this time." Claire felt tears coming. "Find Ava," she said. "Make sure she's okay. Then we'll talk. But Nathaniel, if you hurt her like you hurt me, there won't be enough money in the world to fix it." She walked away, leaving Nathaniel standing alone in the school hallway. He could see Ava sitting on a bench in the courtyard, her head in her hands. For the first time in 15 years, Nathaniel didn't know what to do, but he knew he had to try. Veronica stormed into David Miller's office at the Brooks Investment Building, not even waiting for his secretary to announce her. "Cancel our lunch plans," Veronica said, sitting down across from him. "I have something much more interesting to talk about." David looked at her, surprised. What could be more interesting than the merger Nathaniel is trying to hide from the board? "How about his secret daughter with his ex-wife?" Veronica said. "Claire Bennett's daughter, I just came from her school. The girl is 15 years old and looks just like Nathaniel. He's already filing for custody rights." David's eyes widened. "Claire Bennett's daughter? Are you sure?" Ava sat alone on a bench in the courtyard, staring at the ground. Nathaniel carefully sat down at the other end of the bench. "I used to hate Father's Day," Ava said quietly, not looking up. "All the other kids would make cards for their dads, and I had to explain I didn't have one. Mom always said some families are different, and we were perfect just the way we were." Nathaniel felt his heart ache as he listened. Ava, I didn't know about you. If I had, would it have made a difference? Finally, Ava looked at him and he saw tears in her eyes. That woman, your wife, she looked at me like I was nothing. Is that how you see me? Like some secret you want to hide? Nathaniel moved closer but didn't reach out. You're my daughter. Nothing else matters. Everything else matters, Ava shouted, standing up. Your wife hates me. Mom is upset. Everyone's fighting, and I'm just supposed to accept that you're my dad because you say so? Where were you all these years? Before Nathaniel could answer, Claire appeared at the entrance of the courtyard. Ava, baby, let's go home. I want to know everything, Ava said, looking at both her parents. The whole truth. No more secrets. Claire sighed. Okay, but not here. Let's go to my office. I'm coming too, Nathaniel said firmly. 20 minutes later, the three of them sat in Claire's corner office at Bennett Marketing. Ava looked around at the awards on the walls, the view of Manhattan through the windows, and all the symbols of her mom's success. Is this why you broke up? She asked. Because Mom wanted her own business? Claire and Nathaniel looked at each other, their faces serious. There was 15 years of hurt between them. I thought your mom was going to take my clients, Nathaniel said. We were building the investment company together, but when I found out she was going to start her own business, I was upset. You didn't trust me, Claire said. You never asked why I wanted my own agency. You just thought I was betraying you. Ava looked at her mom. Why did you want your own company? Claire's eyes filled with tears. Because I was pregnant with you, she said. I knew Nathaniel was too busy working to be there for our child. I wanted a business I could run myself on my own terms. Nathaniel stared at her. That's why you were meeting with those marketing people? Yes, you idiot. Claire wiped her tears away angrily. But you wouldn't listen to me. You thought I was against you, so you served me divorce papers before I could even tell you about the baby. You could have told me after, Nathaniel said quietly. When? Claire asked. When your lawyers were threatening to destroy my reputation if I didn't sign quickly, when you were telling people I tried to ruin your company, when you changed your phone number and told security not to let me in the building. I've listened and understood. So you both let pride and hurt feelings keep you apart, and I grew up without a dad because of it. Her words were powerful, and the room went silent. Nathaniel and Claire felt the weight of their past mistakes. The door suddenly opened, and Sam, Nathaniel's lawyer, rushed in. He looked worried. Nathaniel, we have a problem, Sam said. Veronica just called an emergency board meeting. She's telling everyone about Ava and saying it's proof that you're hiding things from the board. She's using it to support David Miller's accusations about the secret merger. Nathaniel stood up. She's trying to force me out of my own company. The board is concerned about a pattern of lying, Sam said. First the merger, now a secret daughter. David Miller is suggesting a vote to remove you. Claire watched Nathaniel. She could see that he was changing. His face went from concerned to serious. She knew that look. She had seen it many times. It was when Nathaniel stopped being a man and became a businessman. Nathaniel Brooks, the CEO. Dad, Ava's soft voice broke the silence. It was the first time she had called him that. Nathaniel looked at her, torn between his daughter and his business. Claire saw the struggle in his eyes and felt a deep disappointment. Go, she said quietly. Go save your company. That's what you do best. Ava stood up, her face determined. If you walk out that door to deal with business instead of staying with family, don't bother coming back. I grew up 15 years without a dad. I can live the rest of my life the same way. Nathaniel looked at Ava, really looked at her. He saw his own strength in her. He saw Claire's strength and something else in Ava's eyes, a wisdom beyond her years. He took out his phone and dialed Sam. Tell the board I'll be there in 2 hours, not a minute sooner. My daughter is more important than any company. He sat back down. I'm here, Ava. Ask me anything you want to know. Claire felt tears roll down her cheeks. But this time, the tears weren't sad. For the first time in 15 years, she saw a glimpse of the man she had fallen in love with, the man who had been lost somewhere between ambition and success. Outside the office windows, the sun was setting over Manhattan, painting the sky orange and pink. Inside Claire's office, three people who should have been a family 15 years ago were starting the slow work of becoming a family again. Sam quietly left the room and closed the door. He pulled out his phone to call Veronica, but then he stopped. Some things were more important than business. He looked back through the office window and saw Nathaniel reach out to hold Ava's hand. She let him take it. Claire smiled softly. Maybe, just maybe, old wounds could finally start to heal. Meanwhile, in the boardroom, Veronica sat at the head of the table, smiling to herself. The board members were talking, their faces showing worry and disapproval. "You see," Veronica said, "Nathaniel has been hiding things from all of you. Not just the merger, but a secret family. How can we trust him to lead this company?" David Miller nodded seriously. "This pattern of lying is troubling. Maybe it's time for new leadership." Before anyone could respond, the boardroom doors suddenly opened. Nathaniel looked angry, his face tight as Sam walked in holding a thick folder. "I see my wife has been busy," Nathaniel said coldly. "Veronica, did you tell the board how you've secretly been selling company shares to David's company?" Veronica's smile faded. David Miller, sitting nearby, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "That's right," Nathaniel said. Sam handed out papers to each board member. "While you've all been listening to Veronica's stories about my life, she's been helping with a secret plan to take over the company," he continued. Claire was sitting in her living room, watching her daughter Ava do her homework. The events of the day felt like a dream. "Mom," Ava said, looking up from her book, "what was Dad like before everything happened?" Claire smiled softly. "He was passionate and brilliant. When he believed in something, he gave it everything he had. That's what made me fall in love with him, but it also caused our problems." Ava asked, "Do you think he really wants to be part of my life, or is it just about control for him?" Claire didn't answer right away because someone knocked on the door. When she opened it, she saw a very elegant older woman standing there. "I'm Margaret Brooks," the woman said, "Nathaniel's mother." "Grandma," Ava said, stepping behind Claire, curious. Margaret smiled softly as she looked at Ava. "Oh my, you look just like Nathaniel did when he was your age," she whispered. At the same time, in the Brooks Company boardroom, the mood had changed. Veronica was sitting still, watching the board members go through the papers Sam had handed them. One of the members said, "These papers show that David Miller's company has been buying stock for months using inside information from Mrs. Brooks." Veronica stood up quickly. "This is ridiculous. Nathaniel is just trying to distract you from his own mistakes," she said. "What about his secret daughter? What about the merger he's been planning?" Nathaniel stayed calm. "The merger was going to be with Claire's company, Bennett Marketing. I wanted her skills to help our company grow," he said. "But now, my daughter is more important than any merger." Veronica laughed bitterly. "So that's it? You're picking your secret family over the company?" she said. Nathaniel sighed. "Yes, I'm fixing the biggest mistake of my life," he said. "Sam, show them the evidence of Mrs. Brooks's stock trading. I'll be stepping down as CEO while I focus on my personal life." Veronica grabbed Nathaniel's arm as he turned to leave. "Don't do this. We can work something out," she begged. He gently took her hand off him. "It's already done. And by the way, you might want to call your lawyer. The SEC will have questions about those stock transfers." Back at Claire's house, Margaret sat gracefully on the couch, looking at Ava with interest. "I always wondered," Margaret said softly. "When Nathaniel came home that day, angry and upset, I knew there had to be more to the story." Ava asked, "Did you know about me?" "No, dear, but I knew your father was making a big mistake letting your mother go," Margaret said. Nathaniel's always had trouble with matters of the heart. Claire brought in tea, her hands shaking. Mrs. Brooks, she said. Margaret, please. We're family, whether you and Nathaniel figure things out or not. She turned to Ava. Tell me, dear, what are your dreams? What do you want to do with your life? Ava began talking about her love of art and her dream of becoming an architect. Claire watched Margaret, who seemed so interested and asked so many questions. She wasn't the cold woman Claire remembered from the past. You know, Margaret said, your grandfather was an architect. He designed half the buildings in the financial district, including the Brooks Investment Building. Ava's eyes brightened. Really? Dad never mentioned that. There's a lot your father never mentions, Margaret said, especially about his own heart. Margaret sat back, sipping her tea. Claire, I owe you an apology. 15 years ago, I should have seen what was happening. I should have made Nathaniel listen. It wasn't your fault, Claire said quietly. We were both too stubborn. Margaret reached into her purse and pulled out an old photo. It was of a teenage Nathaniel standing proudly beside an architectural model. This was your father's first try at following in his father's footsteps, Margaret said, before he decided to focus on business. Ava looked at the picture. He looks happy, she said. Just like you look happy when you talk about architecture, Margaret smiled. Sometimes the best parts of ourselves skip a generation. Suddenly, they heard a car outside. They looked out the window and saw Nathaniel walking up the path to the house. He looked tired but determined. Margaret stood up. I called him after I left the boardroom. I told him if he didn't come and fix things with his family, I'd write him out of my will. Claire couldn't help but laugh. You didn't, she said. Of course I did, Margaret winked. Sometimes even successful men need their mothers to point them in the right direction. The doorbell rang. For a moment, no one moved. Then Ava stood up and walked to the door. When she opened it, Nathaniel was standing there, looking uncertain. Dad, Ava said quietly. Grandma's here. She's been showing me pictures of when you wanted to be an architect. Nathaniel looked past her to see his mother sitting on the sofa next to Claire. Seeing the three most important women in his life together made his throat tighten. Come in, Margaret called. It's time to stop running from your heart. Nathaniel stepped inside, closing the door behind him. He was leaving the world of business and power plays behind. In this cozy living room, surrounded by family, Nathaniel Brooks started to remember who he used to be before he became someone he thought he needed to be. Thanks for watching. If you liked the story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Check out our other videos too. See you in the next one.